You found the skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey there, YouTube. The Dapper Dinosaur here. This is not part of the regularly scheduled Dapper Dinosaur channel, and instead like the first part of what was never intended to be a series, it's just a little something extra. You see, I keep finding the creationists, even the ones with reputations for being pretty stand-up guys, keep tipping their hand that they have to be deceptive in order to defend their ideas, or in some cases, to propound them in the first place. Today I want to focus on one Dr. Robert Carter. He runs the somewhat ironically named Biblical Genetics channel, which is kind of like running a channel called Biblical Particle Physics, or Biblical Germ Theory, or Biblical Orbital Mechanics. Basically, you can't get anything about those from the Bible for the simple reason that the Iron Age authors didn't know about genes, subatomic particles, or even atoms for that matter, germs, or orbits. Here's the closest the Bible gets to genetics.
Then Jacob took fresh sticks of poplar and almond and plane trees, and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the sticks. He set the sticks that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs, that is, the watering places where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the sticks, and so the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted.
That's Genesis 37 through 39, English Standard Version. Funny enough, I don't think that Dr. Carter of Biblical Genetics would accept the version of sympathetic magic-based genetics that Genesis 30 presents. So already, the name of Dr. Carter's YouTube channel and blog are dubious in terms of the level of honesty they evince. Anyway, on August 15th, 2023, Dr. Robert Carter made a 21-minute video as an attempt at a response to Gutsick Gibbon's May 26th, 2023 video, 80% Chimpanzee, the Bogus Creationism of Jeffrey Tomkins. You might remember Jeffrey Tomkins as the creationist PhD who's worse at math than the average 12-year-old. In this video of Erika's, which has yet to my knowledge been addressed specifically for its claim by anyone supporting Tomkins, himself included, Erika showed quite conclusively that Tomkins is either profoundly bad at his job, or is simply a liar. Or, and this is my personal take, a bit of both. She showed that his methods return the same results for percent similarity for any pair of animals tested, whether related according to creationists or not, or that some of his other methods still resolve chimps and humans as more closely related than chimps and gorillas, and within the genetic diversity of what creationists would call a kind. I want to make it very clear that in no way does Erika need me to defend her. She's more than capable of that. I'm not here so much to defend Erika's video as I am to point out that nagging problem creationists seem to have with staying honest. Let's see what Dr. Carter has for us.
But I was planning on doing a different talk than the one I'm going to give. I was working on this idea called Darwin's Abominable Mystery. Now that's his phrase. He wrote,
"What is it with creationists and Darwin? No one cares about Darwin except as a historical figure. He's no longer really relevant to science. If you want to do a talk about the origin of flowering plants, there's literally no reason to bring up Darwin. Unless he's the one who first formally described a plant species you want to talk about. And then it's only to note that he's the one who did that."
But a couple days ago, I watched a video, a long video, 2 hours long. It was a trial to get through it.
Oh, poor Dr. Carter had to take 2 hours out of his day to watch a video. Or, as we shall see, perhaps he didn't. Perhaps it was such a trial that he gave up early on, and then went to make this response.
It was produced by a person I'm well aware of. Her name is Erika. She's a primatologist. She's actually, she and Dan of Creation Myths fame did a video against me several years ago called Robert Carter's Wrong About Everything, which I responded to on creation.com, an article, Robert Carter's Wrong About Everything, ? There'll be a link in the show notes for that if you like.
Oh hey, that's the article in which Dr. Carter attempted to dox me, since I was in that video too, and instead he got the wrong Dapper Dino. I'm not going to say that was necessarily dishonest, but it was at least extremely lazy.
And I pointed out a lot of the errors that they made when they're trying to critique some of the things that I've said. But
he did attempt to do that. I think he failed entirely, but that's neither here nor there.
This case, Erika, the primatologist, has turned her sights on Dr. Jeffrey Tomkins of the Institute for Creation Research. Now, Jeff and I have known each other for a long time. I first met him when he was at Clemson. He was in their genomics department. He was building genomes for a living.
Weird. I'd think that would require some knowledge of how basic arithmetic works. But then again, apparently not. I'm skipping the biography of Tomkins as whatever cool stuff he's done in the past doesn't matter. The question Erika's video set out to answer was not, has Jeffrey Tomkins ever done cool stuff? It was, Is Jeffrey Tomkins' conclusion about the human-chimp genetic similarity a valid conclusion supported by sound methodology?
We have a small community of creationist geneticists, and the secular community, a small group of them, has taken it upon themselves to be our criticizers. And this long video, she's slamming Jeff up and down for supposed mistakes that he's made.
Yeah, that's called peer review, Dr. Carter. You should welcome that, and if you disagree with the conclusions of your critics, it would behoove you to address them, rather than whine about them. You see, this is how science works. When scientist X claims absurd thing Y and gets pushback, the correct thing for scientist X or his or her friends to do is to show why the pushback is erroneous, not make whiny YouTube videos. Now, I'll note that normally peer review is done in the literature, but since Tomkins didn't publish in a real journal, as we'll see, there's nowhere to publish this critique. When creationism gets to the point that it can publish in big boy journals that are, actually on topics relevant to the question, rather than, say, publishing a critique of population genetics in a math journal or a paleontology paper in a microscopy journal, then it will warrant actual real attention in the literature. Until then, it's in the same boat as Flat Earth is in regards to earth science publications.
He has put his foot down and said, no, I'm not wrong.
While providing literally no reason to think that Erika got it wrong beyond him not knowing how computers work.
And it did take him a while to say that in a couple places, and that drives them to distraction. Why'd you take so many years to correct this?
I see that Rob here is confusing Erika's critiques with the critiques of Glenn Williamson, aka Ruhith.
Well, he's not on their timetable. He can do it whenever he wants.
Fair, but until he does, and does it well, there's no reason for people to take his claims seriously.
But he did take a while in a couple of cases to publish some of his corrections.
That's putting it mildly, since all he had to do was boot up the computer program he was using, use any old small dataset, and confirm if it had the bug that was pointed out to him. But instead, he just didn't.
Now, one thing that happened, though, was one of his chimpanzee human similarity estimates that he did. Oh, by the way, he's a plant geneticist, and one of the things that Erika criticizes, he's not a human or ape geneticist, so he doesn't know what he's doing. No, he's a geneticist.
Red alert.
Oh no, that's our first bit of dishonesty. Erika didn't say that because he's a plant geneticist, he did bad work on human genetics. She said that perhaps the reason that he did bad work, as she thoroughly demonstrated, regardless of his background, was because he was outside of his field. Carter is implying that Erika's argument was an ad hominem. It was not. It was a rigorous reproduction of his methods falsifying his conclusion, followed up with speculation as to why Tomkins is so incompetent.
He has the same toolkit. He builds genomes, and once you have the tools, you can apply them to any species you like. Within reason, you do have to learn a few things about the quirks of human and ape genetics, but that's not really that hard.
Well then, I guess we have to come up with some other reason why a competent plant geneticist would make such clear errors that even a couple non-geneticists can absolutely mop the floor with him. It couldn't be because he's just a liar, now, could it?
Now, on the other hand, she's trying to analyze his work in genetics, and she's making some subtle mistakes of her own, which I'm not going to go into, but it's clear that she's not a geneticist.
Oh no, he's not going to get into Erika's mistakes. The only thing that matters when trying to say she got it wrong in her video. But at least now Dr. Carter can dishonestly say that he's addressed this video.
So fine, we have these two people, they're arguing, and he's coming up with estimates of human chimpanzee genomes in the 80% range. Most evolutionary estimates are up in the 98-99% range.
Interestingly, so are Tomkins' estimates once you do the math right, and bother to weight the averages. Something a 13-year-old can handle. But what, is one of Erika's mistakes that she decided to actually, do the math right? Look, I'm not here to defend Erika's video, and Carter here isn't even going to talk about her critique, so let's skip ahead a bit. Next, Rob Carter will be talking about Glenn Williamson, whom I've already mentioned.
One skeptic associated with Erika, he's a computer programmer.
Note that this happened, as far as I know, before Glenn and Erika were ever in contact or knew each other.
He wrote the Answers Research Journal asking that his paper be published. But the problem is you can't publish the Answers Research Journal unless you subscribe to their statement of belief, which is, are you a young Earth creationist? Then you can publish here, and he obviously doesn't.
So every time a creationist tells a critic to write their response and submit it to the ARJ, that's a dishonest tactic, because despite portraying itself as a peer-reviewed science journal, the ARJ is just a faith-based propaganda outlet that won't allow infidels in. What can Al-Kafirun tell anyone about knowledge? Any knowledge they have that accords with the Holy Scriptures is superfluous. Anything they say that contradicts it is wrong. So remember, anytime that anyone cites the ARJ as if it's a real journal, they're either mistaken or they're lying. And Carter here knows that real journals don't have statements of faith. That's why young Earth creationists manage to publish in them every once in a while. Albeit, either in areas outside the expertise of the journal's reviewers, or with work that's entirely conventional.
And there's all these emails back and forth of pairing, and it's just very awkward and very long and very sorted, but...
Yeah, it's very awkward because Andrew Snelling, already a poster boy for dishonesty after writing a paper in his own journal in which he lied that a folded sediment formation didn't have stress fractures, in which he used pictures of the formation in question with people placed exactly to hide the fractures he said weren't there, decided to just say, "Nah, I'm not publishing your paper, or telling you why not, Glenn," with the obvious subtext of, "I'm just a dishonest coward who knows
What I believe is dumb.
but who can't face up to that."
I'm sorry, you just couldn't publish there.
Yeah, they have to keep the echo chamber intact, lest real evidence slap them in the face like a big wet eggplant.
And probably your paper didn't meet the requirements of publication anyway. I don't know.
I'm just tossing out accusations of incompetence while admitting that Glenn was right. Still, though, he's not the right kind of Christian, or maybe even a Christian at all. And remember, we don't listen to infidels here in the kingdom of young Earth creationism. That's why they can't publish in our prestigious journal that, publishes obvious lies. Like that other time that Andrew Snelling said that the dune caused crossbedding in the cochineal sandstone of the Grand Canyon was compatible with marine sand dunes, when literally everyone who checks finds that they are instead aeolian, that is, windborne sand dunes. But Ruhif had spelling mistakes or something. Plus, he couldn't publish even if he didn't.
I haven't read the paper. I just know that it was rejected.
Great, an admission that he's just making shit up. Always great to see that for some Christians, the 9th commandment is optional. Or the 8th commandment if you're Catholic. Whatever.
So, we know that there was an error in that program. The estimates are not in the 70s. Most of his estimates are in the 80s. Now, is that wrong? Well...
Yes, because he didn't weight his averages. Which was the big point Erika had. When Tomkins ran the analysis using the proper parameters, that is, allowing for gapped alignment so that indel mutations can be treated as single changes, and then the math is done properly, his methods provide completely conventional figures for the percent similarity in the human and chimp genome in alignable regions. If Carter wants to disagree, then he can just do the math with Tomkins' raw data, which are publicly available. But we know he won't do that, because I think he knows what the results will be.
Erika claims that these estimates are wrong for several reasons. One is, there's a difference when you run a search using BLAST. Are you going to allow for gaps or not allow for gaps? And apparently he's using one of the settings, but if you use the other settings, you get a much different reading, you get a much higher similarity if you allow gaps in your search sequence.
And as noted by Erika, the only time using ungapped is reasonable is when comparing particular genes in closely related organisms within a species. We're talking like actual groups of organisms that humans can use kinship terms for, like cousin, grandparent, etc. In basically all other cases, ungapped must be used, otherwise the results are basically meaningless. And I'll illustrate it like this. Say you and I both had a copy of the King James Bible. Mine is missing all of Genesis 2, but the books are otherwise identical. Ungapped would tend to fail to align these two Bibles as a single, nearly identical work. Clearly, that's wrong. And yes, I'm simplifying this problem, but the basic idea is correct. Ungapped will miss huge amounts of genetic similarity for the sake of being faster to compute. That's why it's only appropriate in specific circumstances where the presence of insertion or deletion mutations are unlikely and not likely to cause major changes in the data if they do occur, which is never the case for cross-specific comparisons. Rob Carter is a geneticist. He knows this. When he pretends that this is just a choice that you can make, he is lying.
But he's dug in his heels, said, no, this is appropriate.
And both he and Tomkins knows for a fact that it is not, especially since when Erika queried chimps and humans, lions and lynxes, and a human genome, and the same human genome, in every case using the gap parameters Tomkins used, she got back returns in the mid-80% range. Let me hammer that home. Erika compared one genome to itself to the very same identical genome, and Tomkins' method said that they were only about 80% similar. That's me and you having the same edition of the KJV hot off the same press, and then deciding that despite every single letter, punctuation mark, digit, space, and formatting decision being completely identical, that your book and mine are only about 85% similar. That is completely crazy, and both Tomkins and Carter, whom I'll remind you are geneticists, know it's crazy.
Now, I don't want to spend more time on that.
Yeah, then it might be necessary to, do an actual analysis of Tomkins' methods and why they do or do not work, and how Erika's critique might or might not be valid. Instead, we'll just pretend that it's not a problem. Do creationists even know what a response video is supposed to be?
Because to me, it doesn't matter.
It's almost like he's doing all the work for me in showing that creationists just can't be truthful and also know what the hell they're talking about while also promoting creationism. Yeah, Rob Carter, I have a sneaking suspicion you're watching this right now. It's me, the guy who reminded you that census population and effective population aren't the same thing. The guy who was in the Robert Carter Gets Everything Wrong video that you mentioned, but whose presence there you ignored. The guy who you tried to dox, but couldn't figure out which dapper dinosaur I am, is here calling you a liar. You either have not watched Erika's video like you said you did, or you watched it and lied about it, or you watched it and were too stupid to comprehend it. Given that you're a PhD geneticist, I'm pretty sure you're not too stupid. If you think I'm wrong, feel free to demonstrate that you are indeed colossally stupid, because that's the only route open to you for you to not be a demonstrable liar. But don't worry, I'll get more into that in a bit.
In the design criterion, God could have made humans and chimpanzees as similar or dissimilar as he pleased.
Ah, so genetics. The thing passed down sperm and egg. We can't use that to establish actual relationship between organisms then. Convenient, because then you don't actually have to come up with genetic estimates for things like how much diversity can be in a single created kind versus between two similar created kinds. Sure, all the cats in the cat kind, including lions, clouded leopards, and kitty cats, can be genetically closer to each other than they are to, say, vivarids, which makes them a clade with a common ancestor. But what? Chimpanzees and bonobos are together more genetically similar to humans than to any other apes? Don't worry about that. That's just God doing wonky things. Of course, that would have to be post-flood wonky things if Carter wants to maintain that all the great apes minus humans are a single kind. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he wants to go with each ape genus as a separate created kind. It's a weird take, especially since if those are separate kinds, then why aren't all the separate genera of felids or canids separate kinds? Oh, right, because if we use consistent criteria for kinds, it always results in either humans being the same kind as other apes, or in far too many kinds for Noah to fit on his boat. So the obvious solution is the one Carter is giving us. Just don't have a standard.
We literally, now I don't believe this, but we could have had a single letter differences between our two species. One letter that prevents hybridization between humans and chimps. Or he could have made us as different as chimpanzees are from jellyfish. Anything in there is acceptable in the creation model. Now,
good to know that the creation model is completely unfalsifiable from a genetic standpoint. Unfortunately, that also means that it's not scientific. So I'm not sure what the point of having a pretend science journal is.
I did write a paper in Journal of Creation about how God created hierarchically. And that hierarchical creation means that there are pairs of species that are more similar than they are to other things. And that's true across the entire living world.
Fun. Creationism can accommodate the data that evolution predicts. You know, that still means that evolution is winning the scientific credibility game, right?
Now, why did God make humans similar to chimpanzees? I don't know. I'm not in the mind of God. I can't know that. That's not something that we can predict.
Weird how it is something that evolution can predict. It's almost like creationism is scientifically useless, and Robert Carter is just admitting to that right here on his YouTube channel in a video ostensibly defending his buddy Tomkins from the attacks of that mean old goblin.
But speaking of predictions, nobody could predict how similar humans and chimpanzees were.
The exact number? That's true. Evolution didn't predict that. But it did predict that humans should be more closely related to great apes among all other animals, either as a sister group or nested inside the group. Creationism, on the other hand, has no prediction, and having humans be closer to New World monkeys, jellyfish, or ferns would all be something creationism could accommodate. After this, he goes on to explain that the first estimates of genetic similarity were based on heating and mechanical binding of chimp and human DNA back before genetic sequencing was an option. It's irrelevant, so I'm skipping it.
Now, enter some bird scientists. Remember, you're not allowed to work outside your field, according to Erika.
Once again, that's Robert Carter just straight up lying. That's not something Erika ever stated or implied. Instead, it was offered as a possible explanation for Tomkins' evident incompetence in a field other than his own, while that incompetence was itself demonstrated empirically.
But imagine, here come these two bird scientists, Sibley and Ahlquist. They are famous. I have their book, The Phylogeny and Classification of Birds, on my bookshelf at my office back at CMI.
Look at Mr. Big Brain in his bird book, everybody. No one who reads books with fancy names could be lying about his intellectual opponents and his friends.
Famous book, famous work, and they're doing reassociation kinetics amongst birds. Well, they were experts in it, so they did the same thing with humans and chimpanzees. And they estimated, after all the complex math and after cutting out the highly similar sequences, I think it was 98% similar. It might have been 98.5, but 98, let's just say that, percent similar. Okay, that's the running number. That is right on the edge of what the evolutionary community can tolerate. Now, in one sense, it doesn't really matter to evolution how similar we are. Just the similarity is the similarity. But in another sense, there is a limit because it takes time for mutations to propagate in a population.
Ah, the waiting time problem. Look, I'm not here to critique the waiting time problem per se. Others have already done that. Let's just suffice to say that observed evolution of organisms in the wild as well as laboratory experiments have firmly disconfirmed the waiting time problem as a real problem, and Carter dishonestly frames it in the first place by pretending that the fractional function of DNA sequence space is far smaller than it is, and that evolution requires certain specific mutations to occur, and that linked mutations must fix sequentially rather than being able to come together before fixation of either or both. We're skipping the rest of his rant about the waiting time.
Now, it was in the 2010s that Tomkins starts doing his work on human and chimp similarities after the first chimpanzee genome was sequenced in 2005. But he didn't trust it, and rightly so, because they didn't do it correctly.
Oh, okay, so by building the first chimp genome on the scaffold of the human genomes, we got a chimp genome that was significantly off, causing estimates based on it to differ widely from estimates based on newer, unscaffolded genomes like Pantro 6, right?
Instead of sequencing it from scratch, what they did is they just sequenced pieces of it and hung it on the human genome to assemble the chimpanzee genome. They used the human genome as a scaffold. They assumed common ancestry without testing it. And in so doing, the human genome, the initial human genome had 300 big gaps where they couldn't sequence through the highly repetitive centromeres, telomeres, and a couple of spots in the chromosomes. So they put the letter N there. They put 1,000 ends, 5,000 ends, 10,000 ends in these big gaps to say this is a section we have not yet covered. Now the telomere to telomere project is working full steam. They've accomplished full sequencing of several chromosomes now, so that's being completed. But for a long time we didn't have the full thing. When they did the chimpanzee genome though, they added 300,000 gaps. 1 N, 10 ends, 100 N, 1,000 ends. Because there's tons of places where the human and chimpanzee genomes don't align. Now, since then they've redone it from scratch eventually.
Ah, and now we're going to hear about how with the new genomes that didn't use the human genome as a reference, the genetic similarities between chimps and humans went down significantly, right? Keep in mind that if Robert Carter were being honest about Erika's video, he'd know that she used one of the newer chimp genomes that wasn't based on the human genome.
But I think that first wave of graduate students who was coming through at about 2005, I think their PIs told them, don't do anything with the chimpanzee genome. It's garbage.
Do you think that, Bobby? Do you? You got any, evidence? Because obviously comparisons were done using the chimp genome, so I have evidence that people were using them.
Wait 5 or 10 years, we'll replace it, we'll have plausible deniability, but essentially no papers were written on the chimpanzee genome for several years because they had nothing to work with.
The Chimpanzee Genome Project was initially assembled and released in November of 2003. Let's just check Google Scholar and see if any papers were written in, say, 2004 about the chimpanzee genome. Weird. 2007 results. Well, maybe there weren't any in 2005 then. Oh shoot. 2,360. Well, I'm sure there won't be any in 2006. Oh damn. 2,510. Hey Bobby. Did you just lie to my face about there being no papers published on the chimp genome after the publication of Pantro 1? Because it sure seems like you did. Now, why would that be? I mean, maybe he just didn't check and made that up on the spot, but I'd count that as at least gross disregard for the truth, if not outright dishonesty. And those things are a hair's breadth away from each other by my estimate.
But now we have better genomes, and to be fair, the original genome construction mostly came through. They did have to rearrange a few things, and there are some mistakes that they made, but it mostly came through.
Oh, so it wasn't some big mistake that rendered the genome mostly unusable like you said, was it, Bobby? It's almost like you lied about that too. Or do you just not know what you're talking about and instead are just making things up on the spot? I mean, you know enough about human and chimp genetics that you feel it's appropriate to throw your hat in the ring in the middle of a discussion about just that, even if you're not going to actually address anything that's actually at issue.
So it wasn't a good genome, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But
what's this? Science improving its techniques and gaining new data, all the while still failing to support anything distinctive about young Earth creationism? Quelle horreur!
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
they shouldn't have done it that way anyway because they actually didn't know. In fact, they got lucky.
Oh, they predicted based on the evidence of fairly recent common ancestry of chimps and humans that the genomes would be so similar that they could construct the chimp genome on the basis of the human genome and that it would mostly work out. And lo and behold, it did. That's what you call making a successful prediction. I guess they were just lucky in that evolution-based predictions turned out to be right. But since they usually do, I'm not sure that's luck. That's what you call good science. Or dare I even say it? The gold standard in science?
But now we have a better genome. But back then, one of the things that Tomkins was doing, he wasn't taking the chimpanzee genome because he knew that was created by taking a lot of chimpanzee sequences and lining them up and taking an average. So instead, he went to the sequence read database and he took the sequences, he chopped them up into various length pieces, and he threw them at the human genome to see what percent would stick. And then he took pieces of the human genome, he threw it at the chimpanzee and see what percentage would stick. And he found out that only maybe, I'm going to say 85% on average, because he has several estimates in that range. Just to say 85% of them stuck.
Yeah, back when he was using the ungapped parameter, which is the wrong thing to do, so who cares?
Well, that told him that the human chimpanzee genomes are 85% similar.
Yep, he argued that using ungapped parameters was a reasonable way to do it. He has since changed his mind, and his current estimates are in line with the mainstream estimates, so we're skipping the rest of this bugs nonsense.
And that is fair. Apples to apples, 96.6. But understand this, hey, if you're a skeptic, if you're an evolutionist, if you believe in evolution, if you're a Christian who believes in evolution, or an evolutionist doesn't believe in Christianity, or if you're a creationist, listen carefully.
Well, those categories contain most people, so I guess I'll listen carefully.
If 96.6 is the best modern estimate of our similarity,
Big if.
the true similarity is necessarily less than that.
What the hell is a true similarity? That's not a term that is used in genetics that I'm aware of. That sounds like when creationists just talk about information growing up and down without ever telling what information really is, how it's measured, or anything else about it. It's just a weasel word that sounds like it means something, but doesn't. What is this true similarity? How do we know how similar two genomes truly are? Who knows?
Because you have to include all of the indels, you have to include the copy number variations, the centromeres, the telomeres, and other things.
Well, the indels are taken care of with the ungapped parameter, so...
There's a huge number of differences between us. I mean, there's 30 million single-letter differences between humans and chimpanzees.
Hey, that's big number, therefore God. If you had big number, therefore God on your bingo sheet, please fill it in. If you don't fill it in, you can't be recognized for getting a bingo.
There's not enough time in evolutionary history, even if given billions of years.
Oh good, waiting time nonsense. Hey, guess what? It's still been falsified empirically, so we're going to skip?
So, in the end, on one hand, I don't care how different we are.
Well yeah, it's not like Rob Carter cares about science or evidence. He's got dogma to defend.
On the other hand, I'm a nerd, I want to know. It's an interesting question, I want to know. On the other hand, as long as it's less than is required by evolutionary theory, I also don't care how similar they are. It can be 98%, I'm happy with that. It's on the edge, I'd be happier with 95%. 90% would be killer. If it's in the 80s, that'd be even better.
Oh, so he does care. Guy can't make up his mind even in the same paragraph.
Now, if you want a discussion on Tomkins and the mistakes he may or may not have made,
I would like that, yes, especially in a video that's a freaking response to Erika's video on that very topic. I know, what a crazy thing to expect.
go listen to her long 2-hour-long video. There'll be a link below.
As of the time of the writing of the script, Carter had not linked to Erika's video in the description of his video. Now, I've forgotten to do things like that, so I'm not saying he's lying here, but still, he's wrong.
Or read some of Jeff's articles where he explains why he does not believe he made a mistake.
I've heard Jeff's response to Erika. He doesn't even understand the problem based on his response. It's the very reason Erika shifted her assessment of Tomkins from obvious fraud to perhaps sincere moron. I'm less inclined to think that Tomkins is a moron. After all, he got a real degree in genetics. That requires some level of intellectual capacity. I think he's playing dumb because, let's face it, lay creationists won't understand either way, and creationist geneticists don't care about evidence anyway.
I'm just going to leave that hanging out there because, honestly, the answer doesn't matter. In the Bible.
Don't care. I'm not here for Bible Story Hour, especially since it's the book whose version of genetics is based on sympathetic magic, as if genes were more or less voodoo dolls.
Now, if you're really struggling with this,
I'm really not. I figured it out decades ago, and the fact that I was being lied to by hacks like Robert Carter is why I have this channel. They lied to me for decades, and they're still doing it to others. Okay, after that, Carter just gives his personal testimony.
I'm sorry, but Gutsick Gibbon has not done a good enough analysis on the work of Jeffrey Tomkins or me or other creation scientists on this issue.
Weird then how we get no actual response to her, and as we'll see soon, there's also good evidence that Carter doesn't even know what her response is, because he seems to be lying about even having watched her video.
The point is, the differences are greater than 96.6%.
Not based on Tomkins' work, they're not.
Therefore, there's not enough time in evolutionary history to account for them.
Ah, more waiting time stuff. Stop trying to make the waiting time problem happen. It's not going to happen.
There, I laid my cards on the table.
The one card of an already falsified so-called problem.
I hope you're blessed by that. I hope you're encouraged. I hope you learned something.
In order for me to have learned something, one, there'd have to have been a whole lot more honesty, and two, there'd have to have been an attempt to, respond to Erika in this response video to Erika, rather than a steadfast refusal to do so.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to support biblical genetics, there'll be some links in the show notes below.
I don't, but thanks. Okay, so let's look at the interaction that made me want to do this video in the first place. It occurred in the comments to this video. One Mr. Dan Ang1, with whom I am not familiar, said, "The trouble is that doing the same things Tomkins did with closely related animals, according to both creationists and geneticists, like lions/tigers or horses/donkeys, generates similar numbers in the 80s and about 95% using the same method as commonly used on humans/chimps. And if we can't get even less than 98% similarity in 6 to 7 million years, or even 10 to 11 million years, wherever that number came from, how can possibly tigers and lions be the same kind, reaching 95%, or even less than 85% using Tomkins' methods, in less than 5,000 years? That is simply absurd numbers for tens of millions of years, we learned from this video. So we end up with millions of species on the Ark again, an Ark which can barely cram in a few thousand animals and a few days' worth of food, but no way to care for the animals between 8 people. Now I want to point out that Mr. Dan Ang1 is completely correct, and Erika is the one who, in that video, showed that Tomkins' methods, when applied to things like lions and domesticated cats, a pair of species she specifically used in the video to test Tomkins' methods, have the same genetic similarity as humans and chimps within a margin. Now the response from Mortals isn't something I'm interested in. Instead, let's take a look at Carter's response. "I am unaware of any creationists who have duplicated his methods on horses/donkeys, lions/tigers, etc. I am also unaware of any evolutionists who have duplicated his methods at all. That is, I do not trust that they actually have, and looking at what has been done clearly shows that different methods were used. Just saying." That is directly what Erika did in her video. She reproduced Tomkins' methods exactly as evidenced by following the methods he set out in his paper and duplicating his chimp human results. She even went into his actual paper and used his exact parameters in the same version of the same software Tomkins used. She specifically compared chimps and humans and got 82.94 to 85.84%, humans and bonobos and got 84.66% to 85.67%, bonobos and chimps and got 84.48 to 85.98%, the lion and the lynx and got 85.46 to 86.46%, the lion and the domestic cat and got 87.66 to 89.41%, the European and Indian domesticated cows, which remember, are animals of the same species, and got 84.65 to 85.43%, a Han Chinese genome and a Japanese human genome, and got 79.66 to 87.65%. Again, that's 2 members of the same species, and both part of the same migration into East Asia, under either the scientific out of Africa model or the made-up out of Babel model creationists like to pretend has support. She also compared a human genome to itself, a reference genome to itself, and she got 83.83% to 88.52% similarity. Now, if Robert Carter watched Erika's video, there is no way he could possibly have missed this. It is a major portion of her video, and just the comparison methods and results took up about 9.5 minutes, never mind her discussion of why these results are a problem that went on afterwards. I'll address Bobby directly. Bob, can I call you Bob? Oh wait, I don't care if you're okay with it or not, especially after you tried to dox me. You have lied here. You either watched Erika's video and you know that she did in fact replicate Tomkins' methods by copying them directly from his 2014 paper, and got results that showed conclusively that his methods are worthless, or you didn't watch it and this entire video is a lie. I guess the other option is that you're brain dead, Dr. Carter, and you're being puppeted in this video, Weekend at Bernie's style. Feel free to let me know in another rambling response video where you fail to even identify me, or you just pretend I'm someone else with a similar name again. As for you, my dear audience, I once again am at the end of a video, and once again, I'm wondering why it is that creationists are so consistently dishonest. If you're a creationist who made it this far, please let me know what the reason for this evident mendacity is. I really would like a reason beyond, well, it's okay to lie if you're lying for Jesus, or just, well, wouldn't you know it, every credentialed creationist just happens to have the IQ of a moldy pair of socks. For everyone who's watched this far, thank you. Please hit like if you enjoyed this, or dislike if you didn't. And let me know what you liked or what the problem was in the comments. Either way, please subscribe, it's free and reversible, unlike the brain damage I suffer daily at the hands of Carter and his ilk. And make sure to turn on all notifications with the bell icon so you're always alerted when I have new content. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur. Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Ben Tovind, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Elron Teller, Furavara, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostick Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babbity, Monkey They Them, Mrs. Specsender, Sphincter of Doom, and the Venerable Bede. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.